When living in Africa, I had decided to do a series of videos on legends. There's lots of legends in Africa. I'd led the expedition to look for the lost city of the Kalahari, and then I come across the sinkhole on the border of Namibia. The sinkhole was about 16 meters deep. I believe only one other person had been down it, and the legend was that there was a snake that lived in the sinkhole that would turn into a maiden and lure the local men into the river and drown them. So before I left, I decided to do one last expedition. So being sponsored by Land Rover, I got the Land Rover guys and we went to go and look what was at the bottom of the sinkhole. So this is the story of that expedition. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. It would really help the channel. I'm Greg van der Reis. I've been leading expeditions and driving 4x4s in Africa for almost 40 years. Join me as I explore my new home country of New Zealand. There's a legend of a snake. It's a Nama legend. The Nama and the Hottentot people believe that there's a large snake which lives in a hole called Wondergat. Wondergat is located approximately 50 kilometers south of Sendlingsdrift. And the Nama people believe that the snake turns into a maiden and lures the men into the river and drowns them. This legend is not unique to the Nama and the Hottentot people, but to a lot of the Bushman people, not only in this area, but they all seem to have legends about big snakes. And as skeptical as we can be as Westerners, a prospector called Fred Cornell wrote a book called The Glamour of Prospecting. And this is his story about the snake. He says, he's talking about Isak, one of the workers. And he said, we asked him why. And after beating around the bush a bit, he told me that in the middle of the river and exactly opposite where we were camped, there was a big rock in which a huge snake, the groot slang, in which every Richtersveld Hottentot family believes had his home. And it was not safe for us to be here with horses. We had long heard of the snake. Many reputable Hottentots and a few white men had claimed to have seen it. Many more had seen its large spoor in the sand or mud, 1.5 feet wide. It is believed to take cattle from the banks, and the native people fear it mightily. There are no crocodiles in the Orange River, and besides, there have never been traces of feet or spoor. But it is remarkable that the Hottentot's name for this huge python, or whatever it might be, is Kiman, which is the Eastern name for alligator. Anyhow, we were far too tired to care for snakes, and of course stayed where we were. The only thing to annoy us were huge long-legged tarantulas that kept coming out with incredible swiftness, running to the fire where they sizzled, squirmed, and smelt unpleasant. In the morning we found that the river was long, wide, and still, and there are apparently very deep stretches of water that a big rock rose out of in the center. The guide said to us that this is where the snake lived. We never found the snake. That was Fred Cornell's story of his experience of Hitzi Ibib, or the legendary snake of the Richtersveld. We travelled north. The area is very dry, and other than the Orange River, which is the border with Namibia, the only water is in wells which are dug very deep. The water is nothing that you'd want to drink, and basically the sheep drink it. Some of it is brackish, but it has a foam on the top which doesn't make it particularly appealing. While driving north, we were also looking out for a tree called the halfmens. In English, that would be a half person. It's also called the North Looker, and it always faces north. It's an interesting tree, and the legend around the tree is that the local people were forced to leave the area, very much like the biblical story of Lot. and the people that turned back to look at their homeland were turned into these trees. Over the years, I spent probably close to 9 months all in all in this area, exploring the old mines, the legends, following tracks. It's really interesting, just the history. No minerals were really found here. They did mine, and there were a lot of prospectors. They found very few industrial diamonds, a little bit of asbestos, fluorspar, a little bit of copper, but that's about all. But there were lots of books written about the area, and I would go up for a week at a time. What I really enjoyed was in 10-14 days I would not see another person, and just sleeping next to the fire listening to the jackals was an experience I really miss. So where we are now, we've arrived at the sinkhole. The sinkhole is quite dangerous. As you can see, it doesn't have any fencing around it, and if you fall in, you fall 5.5 stories. The easiest way to get down this hole was to use this gantry. One of the guys welded it together. It swung out so that you could have clear access down the 5.5 stories. So you'd hook onto the ropes. We had climbing ropes and other safety ropes, and you'd swing out and abseil down to the bottom. Also, it was the only way to get out, because being like a muddy clay sides, you couldn't climb out, so the only way out was to be winched out using this gantry. 3 of us went down. I'd been climbing since I was 14. Catherine had been climbing for a number of years, and Ari, standing there on the right holding the rope, he'd also been climbing for a number of years. So we decided to go down to the bottom, see what was there. We assumed there wouldn't be a snake. The idea was actually to go through the side tunnel and see what was in the water. We'd brought dive tanks and we were going to dive it. When we got there, the roof of the side tunnel had collapsed, and there was a tiny little gap. It might have been 40-50 centimeters high, and being Africa, we just felt if we'd gone through and there'd been an issue, we wouldn't have got out. It's not like there were rescue services or anything. The other point is that we'd never got permission to do this. If we'd asked for permission, it probably would have been denied. Anyway, you get to the bottom, and there was a sandy bottom. The only thing we did find down there was one dead snake, and it was pretty obvious that owls lived in this sinkhole. There were owl pellets, again by the dead snake, so we presume the owl brought the snake down, or the snake fell in and the owl ate it. But that was all there was. But still, something to tell the grandkids one day, and I've done it. Before we abseiled down, we lowered this platform with lights on. So we had a generator, and we lowered the platform with lights and a camera so that we could see what was there before we went down. The access at the top is quite dangerous. So, I mean, somebody could have fallen down, and another animal could have fallen down, anything could have fallen down. So we sent the platform down with lights, first had a look, watched the video, and then got ready to abseil. It was quite a big team. Being the last expedition before I moved, there must have been probably 8 cars. We really had a great time, spent 2 or 3 nights camping on the way there and back. The distances you get used to. It's nothing to drive 800-900 kilometers per day, camp somewhere and drive back the next day. So we had some really good times camping, sitting around the fire.
The hook to our line with the carabiner. The hooky thingy.
finally we were all out. Then it was just dismantling the gantry and putting all the other gear away and going to a riverbed. I found a really nice riverbed sometime before, and camping in the riverbed was lovely. It was away from the main track, but what was nice is that it was very sheltered. There were lots of scorpions, so at night they come out. If you use an ultraviolet light, you can pick up scorpions, and at night you'd sit with your feet folded on your chair because the scorpions come out, and for some reason they're attracted to the fire, and they'd basically just run into the fire. So you'd see all these scorpions go in, and you just made sure your tent was zipped closed and your feet were off the ground and you didn't wear slip-slops or jandals. On the way out, we drove up Smith's Pass. Smith's Pass has a history for me. I'd heard about Smith's Pass many years ago, and it was built by obviously a chap called Smith. His name was Paulus Smith. He had a farm in the area, and he built the pass to make it easier and quicker to get to town. When we found the pass, it hadn't been driven by vehicles for I think 50 years. Driving down, there was a very bad side slope. It had been washed away and there was a rock in the way. And as I got to the rock, my vehicle started sliding towards the edge. And trying to reverse made no difference. And I thought I was going to go over the edge. So at the end of the day, I opened the doors, accelerated like hell, managed to get the vehicle back on the track. And I thought, if it starts to go, I'm going to jump. Anyway, we made it, and a friend of mine, Bruce, went back with a jackhammer and got rid of the rock. So it solved the problem. But good memories all the same. And the expedition was over. You always spend so much time planning, and it always ends so quickly. The Lost City expedition, I think I planned for more than a year. Anyway, we're on the last track, and then it's the tar road south, back home. I love the expeditions. I hope you enjoyed the video. It's a very shortened version of the original. And yeah, let me know what you think. Have a good one. Please subscribe. Cheers.